So for those who feel that they can't afford to hire the best, my response is simply, you can't afford not to.
Some industries have a reputation for being traditional, slow-paced, or behind the times. Sometimes that reputation is well-earned. Sometimes it's an unfair generalization. And either way, there's always some companies and leaders who break that mold. Today's guest is one such leader. Following on from our chat last week with real estate pro Matt Pizon, today I'm joined by construction CEO Mike Kaeding. We'll be talking about his experiences in the construction industry, from growing up in a family construction business, learning the ups and downs of running a company early on, and then in his own career, later on joining the family business, taking it over at a relatively young age, and adopting a modern leadership and management approach that is fairly unique and pretty revolutionary for the industry that he works in. Construction is one of those traditional sectors that I mentioned just now, which makes it super interesting and groundbreaking, pun intended, to hear Mike talk about the work that his company is doing, their production line idea, their 2-week peer-assessed hiring process, unlimited paid time off, flexible working policies, and more besides. If you have ever felt stuck or demoralized by your industry, then this episode is a breath of fresh air and may just give you that inspiration you've been looking for. And before we kick off today, a quick reminder for you about my Integrity Leaders online community. Do you ever feel that loneliness of leadership? When you're a new manager in a specialist or technology-driven company, it can be a daunting experience. I've been there, and that's why I have created a space just for you. At Integrity Leaders, you can benefit from live events, learning materials, on-demand courses, loads of leadership resources, early access to my newsletter and to these very podcast episodes, all with the opportunity to meet and share experiences with other new leaders like you. Join our online leadership community for free for 60 days. No obligation, no payment details required. All I ask in return is your engagement, your honest feedback to help us build and improve what we're doing. Discover more at www.leadernotaboss.com. And without further ado, let's get Mike on the show.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Mike, thank you for joining me today from not very sunny Minnesota.
Well, thanks for having me.
Not at all. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Really looking forward to hearing all about your business and what you do and all the leadership lessons that you've learned from doing it. And to kick us off, really, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce yourself to the listeners. Tell us a bit about your company, what it does, why you got into that sector, and what gets you out of bed in the morning.
Yeah. Well, what we do at a very simple level is we design, build, and rent apartments. But we're really focused on driving down the cost of constructing those apartments. We've been achieving about a 20 to 30% reduction in those costs. And we believe that over time, we can achieve a 50% reduction. But imagine what that means. It means someday your rent or your mortgage payment could be half. And that's our dream. We're fighting to solve housing affordability in America and maybe someday also in the UK.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's particularly topical in the UK in the last year or two with some certain high profile and controversial government decisions, but let's not get into politics. That'll derail the whole episode.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So tell us a bit more about the company, which is called Norhart, I believe.
Yeah.
And how do you set yourselves apart aside from the obvious? make everything cheaper?
Yeah. So, well, that's the big one, is driving down the cost of construction. But I think another key thing that makes us very different is to do that, we brought all of the work under one roof. So in the world of construction, you typically have a different company doing the windows and a different company doing the plumbing and the electrical and the concrete. It's all different companies coming together for one project, and then they all leave. Well, they don't always work well together. They're often frustrated with one another, and they don't work super efficiently. So what do? We brought all that work on one roof. So every single trade is now working for our company. Now, imagine for a moment if a construction company were to produce cars. You'd have a different company installing the windshield, a different company installing the door, and a different company installing the wheel. And of course, the wheel company, they would call you up and say, hey, I'm so sorry, I got delayed on another project and I can't get out there for 2 weeks. Well, you'd be shut down. Now, see, the world of manufacturing looks at us and says, dude, you guys are crazy. We look back at them and say, this is the way it's always been done. See, if you look over the past 60 years, industries like manufacturing have improved labor productivity by 760%. Construction during that time has done nothing. It's been stuck at a measly 10%. And so if we can take the lessons learned from those other industries and apply it to our own, then we can start seeing success. And that's really the key difference to what we're doing and how we're different than our construction companies, is we're applying the manufacturing thinking and infrastructure to how we build housing. I mean, imagine for a moment if the phones were built the way that construction was built. We would have $10,000 phones today that were the size of a giant brick, right? We would never put up with that. Why are we okay with that in the world of construction? We shouldn't be, and we need to change it.
Centralizing everything and then the time savings that you're going to achieve by doing that straight away must be a huge cost saving as well, because lost time tends to lead to lost money, doesn't it? But I mean, what are some of the other techniques that you use to lower those construction costs?
Yeah, so once we bring all the work under one roof, now we can start doing things that other people can't. One little thing is that we have the subcontractors in-house. We don't have to pay subcontractor profits anymore. But once you bring on that work under one roof, we can apply something like the assembly line. I know, revolutionary. But how in the world can you take a building and drive it down a line? Well, you can't. Here's what you can do. You can take the person and move them through the building. So right now within our teams, about every 5 hours, the teams shift the building by approximately 1 unit. So every 5 hours, you can look at the end of our building and see a brand new apartment unit completed. And that one technique can take a project that might be 15 months and drive it down to 9, for the simple reason that we're condensing the space that work is done. There's no big chunks of our building that there's no work being done, and that improves efficiency. But there are 10,000 little things, 10,000 little things. It's not one big thing that you work to do to improve the system. And this is where it comes to one of the most important points, is you have to build the capacity and the ability of your team to solve those problems. See, if you think that a leader can solve all those 10,000 problems, you're crazy. If you think your leadership team can do it, you're crazy. You literally need everyone in your organization to do that. And so you have to work to build a culture of that continuous improvement. So that's another piece of the puzzle. But there's a lot that goes into it to drive down those costs.
Interesting. And the kinds of buildings that you're working on, presumably they're like the apartment complexes, I suppose, rather than individual houses, or do you do a bit of both?
That's right. Right now we're focused on apartment buildings. And the reason for that is it's super hard to do this well. I mean, Elon Musk talks about how it's hard to produce a car, but it is 10 to 100 to 1,000 times harder to build the system that builds that car. And it's true in the world of construction. It's hard enough to build a house or an apartment building, but to build the system that builds it, it is freaking nearly impossible. It's so hard. And I have so many skinned knees and roughed up over the years, been kicked in the stomach so many times that, it's really hard to do. And so we're focused right now on mastering apartments, but maybe with time, once we feel like we mastered that, we'll explore other avenues.
Interesting. So the reason I asked, because I was going to ask you as well about some of the technological changes that we've seen, particularly in the last 5 to 10 years, and how those have impacted your industry. And one of them that I think is really cool is 3D printing.
Yeah.
So it's now possible to 3D print a home. I guess that's not going to work for quite a large or sort of building like you're working on, but any other technologies that have maybe had a big impact on what you're doing?
Oh, there's so many technologies. One thing I'll mention, though, is oftentimes these individual technologies get a lot of excitement and hype. But when you actually look into it, it improves things, but it's just one part of a much larger puzzle. No one of these items is actually going to solve housing affordability. The math doesn't pencil that way. But with that said, there are cool technologies like the 3D printed homes or full volumetric offsite construction, or we're looking at technology of robotics that uses AI to drive around the unit, actually paint the unit completely autonomously. Or there is excavation equipment. They have a whole fleet of equipment. You're sitting in a lawn chair with like an umbrella and a martini. Well, maybe not the martini, but you're controlling all of the equipment using a simple iPad to just run the entire site. I can imagine a day in a world that construction workers can be remote workers because we have things like the Tesla bot or the Boston Dynamics robots that you're actually controlling via a computer running a construction site. So there's so many cool things. And not only just robotics, which I think is actually kind of hard to master. There's also just the world right now of software. And so how we develop our plans and build or design our buildings, this is really an optimization problem. In the world of computer science, optimization problems are actually really hard to solve because you've got to explore the entire landscape of possibilities. But right now, architecture and design is mostly done by humans, but we're actually working on systems and infrastructure to make that more automatic and to explore that landscape of possibilities much faster and much deeper to find the most optimal designs. That's another kind of fun technology that we're working on.
Yes, another one I've read about quite a bit is this augmented reality kind of approach where it's blending the VR goggles, or not quite VR, but I don't know how much of an application that has in the real world of construction. It feels like it'd be quite useful for things like site inspections and
super cool, because if you could get a Microsoft HoloLens or something to kind of show you what you do at every stage, that makes, again, that work a lot easier to perform accurately and correctly. The challenge with that, and I think the Microsoft HoloLens may have been put on ice a little bit, it's an informational problem. And right now in the world of construction, information is not even like great at the plan level. Like, how can you get it then to a HoloLens without first cleaning up that first stage of information? I was talking to one major software company and one of their board of directors not too long ago. And I asked him, I said, dude, why haven't you come up with better software for the construction industry? He told me something I won't soon forget. He looked at me and said, Mike, you have to realize that some of our customers are places like Pixar and Google and other major places. The construction industry is nowhere near. They're not even asking for the things that you're talking about. And Pixar is obviously pushing the envelope forward. We're gonna support what the customers are actually asking for. Construction is still like largely in 2D plans, not even in 3D. It's like we're so far behind the times. Like, you just have to catch up to everyone else, and we'll see improvements just by doing that.
Why is that, do you think, that the industry is that far behind?
I have an answer. I have to be careful of how I say it, though. There are amazing people in the construction industry, and frankly, we've hired a lot of them. We have some of the world's best, and our teams are phenomenal. Our acceptance rate is something like 0.2% into our company, which is unheard of in the world of construction. So excluding that, in general, construction doesn't tend to attract the highest, most achieving people in the world, right? If you can go work for Google or you can go work for your local construction company, where are you going to go work? Probably Google, right? And so as a result, I don't think there are certainly great minds in the field, but I think a lot of the people aren't necessarily the best and the brightest. And so they're very much are of the mindset of, this is the way I've done it. This is the way my granddad has done it. And this is the way my dad has done it. By golly, this is the way I'm going to do it. And if you push me to tell me to do anything different, I'm going to tell you to bleep off, right? Or, it even goes to the point where I've seen different trades come in and they actually rip out the work out of the wall of another trade. And the reason is, frankly, it's ego. It's, hey, you were in my way. Instead of talking to you, instead of having a conversation, instead of improving the situation, I'm going to teach you a lesson by ripping out the work out of the wall. And so it's that kind of rough and tumble mentality. I was talking, our teams are not unionized, but I was talking to one union who wanted to come unionize part of our company. They're actually great, really, really good people. We had a great conversation. They weren't trying to push their way into things. They're just kind of promoting what they could bring to the table. And I said, great. One of the challenges we've had is tapping into the experience pool of people in the union, because there's a lot of experienced people in that realm. I said, okay, if I select your union to come work on our offsite construction site, and does that mean I then get access to the other union's labor? He said, no. It's like, what? Can I then use them as the main, can I kind of use all of you guys for this offsite construction? And because it was offsite, because it was in a factory setting, they said, no. It's like, well, what's the point? I get your labor, but I don't get the other labor. And then I asked him, I said, dude, do you guys work well together? Do you build good relationships with the other unions so that we can do a good job of the work we're doing here? And he looked at me with a completely straight face and said, Mike, one thing you have to understand about the unions is good fences make good neighbors. So, okay. That's what we're trying to fix, right? We can't solve these problems unless we work well together. And they just, it wasn't that they weren't willing to work well together. They didn't see hope in making that a reality.
Yeah. So I think what's quite interesting there is earlier on you were talking about building cars and the production line and that kind of approach. And again, that's an industry where technological change, when it happened, was quite difficult for a lot of the people working in that industry. And I do wonder, there's that whole human mentality, isn't there, about resisting change and just, I've always done it this way, therefore this is the best way. That sort of, it's very anti-continuous improvement.
Yeah. If you look at some other industries like apparel, it used to be that clothing was a huge part of the budget of an average person. Well, we've used innovation. We made massive changes there. And now clothing, unless you go with fancy brand names, if you want just basic clothing and get by, it's essentially de minimis for most people in a wealthy nation. And so we can do that through everything we're working on. There's no reason these industries have to be so expensive.
Yeah, it's kind of a paradox is probably the wrong word, fallacy maybe, but that whole mindset around refusing to embrace a new technology, because quite often the logic is, well, if I embrace that, I might lose my job.
Yeah.
And that's a worry that by resisting the change, what you tend to actually achieve is exactly what you were scared of, because the technology is coming one way or the other. The change is going to happen with or without you. So if you make it without you, then it will truly be without you. You're gone.
Exactly.
It's quite, I don't know, it's a very difficult problem. So I don't envy you having to solve that one.
Yeah. And the key there is if you bring on amazing people, they pioneer the change, right? They unlock doors. They make things happen for you that you didn't even know were possible. And that's really at the heart of all this. If you want to change an industry, you need the right people to make that happen.
Which answers what my next question was going to be, which is, why is it important to build a great culture and find the best people? I think we've covered that.
Well, yeah. But you know what's interesting? One of probably the most single most important lesson that I've ever learned in my life is to hire the best people. And when I say that, I truly mean the best. We fly people in from other states to come work during the week, and we will fly them home on the weekend. One of our employees in 2007, Steve Jobs announces the brand new iPhone. Steve Jobs walks off that stage, and then our employee walks on that same stage following Steve Jobs' announcement. It's that kind of caliber of people. And as we just mentioned, those people change the game. But I think what most business leaders often question me here, they say, Mike, sounds nice in theory, but that is expensive. And it's true. It is expensive. The best people, you have to pay them top of market to keep them. We have to have great benefits. You have to have a great culture. You have to build all this stuff, and it costs money. But here's the thing that most leaders fail to understand. And that is that the best people outperform the average by 2 to 5 to even 10 times as much. And I've seen it so many times over. So instead, if you're looking at the cost per person, yeah, that's more expensive, but instead you should look at the cost per unit produced. And from that perspective, your best people are actually your least expensive. So for those who feel that they can't afford to hire the best, my response is simply, you can't afford not to.
Yes, I'm so with you there. It's a conversation that comes up so many times on this podcast. It's the same kind of dynamic as well around paying people what they're worth, paying them in accordance with the value they bring to your business. That's the only thing that matters. It doesn't, I don't care about what the prevailing market rate is for their job title. You pay for the result you want, right? So, and that's exactly what you're saying. So on board with that.
Love it. Yeah.
So, there's a couple of other things in there that are really interesting to me as well. So particularly in the context of the last few years, they've been quite difficult in the labour market generally. I can only imagine that's been particularly sharp in the construction industry. A lot of people now in your position are struggling to find those great employees. So what is it that you're doing differently to help you find them?
Yeah, we really struggled. A number of years ago when we were smaller, we were probably accepting half of the people that applied just because we needed bodies. We needed people to come in, and that is horrible, but that's sort of normal in the world of construction. So we're like, okay, stop. Like, how do we do this differently so that we can solve this problem? And we started looking at it. What we ended up doing was, we were about a 100-person company at that time. We ended up hiring on 15 recruiters. 15. Insane. It's utterly insane. Now, there was ways we were able to minimize some of those costs, but we ended up hiring 15 recruiters. And in doing so, it gave us such a leg up in the market. What we ended up doing was we started identifying all the major companies in the market, all the best players working for those companies, started building relationships with them in advance so that we could then pull from that pool of connections when we had jobs that we needed to fill. Once we changed that, it opened up the floodgates for us. We no longer had an issue of finding great people. Then we had the next problem is, how do you identify that out of this pool that you have coming in? And we've got a number of rounds of interviews that we do, but some of the more unique things is, for most of the jobs, but not all, we do a 2-week trial period. And at the end of the 2 weeks, it is not management, it's not leadership, it's not me who decides whether or not to hire them. It is the coworkers that worked with them for those 2 weeks. So at the end of the 2 weeks, they actually look at our values and they ask for every single value, how does that employee stack up compared to our values? And when you have an amazing team, they are the greatest guard keepers to making sure that they don't work with anyone that's even remotely subpar. And so they're super picky of who actually makes it past the trial period. But even that, you're hired on full-time now, you're a full member of the team, you still have people that squeak by. So what we did next is we followed the Netflix principle, and that is the keeper test. The question that managers ask themselves on a regular basis, if this particular employee were to quit, how hard would I fight to try to change their mind? If the answer is I would fight tooth and nail to change their mind and get them to stay, awesome, they're the right person. But if it's anything shy of that, it means that they're not the right person. In fact, another question we often ask ourselves is, if this particular employee were to apply for the job today, would you hire them? If the answer again is not enthusiastically yes, then why are they here? So we support people really well on the way out. We help people find jobs. We give severance. We do a lot of things to make sure that they're in a good spot. And we have employees that come back and thank us for letting them go. But we are relentless about making sure that we have the right team. And see, many managers are afraid to let those people go. They're afraid of the pain. Like, the devil I know is better than the devil I don't know. We really fight to get people past that mentality because I know what amazing teams look like. And now I'm tenacious about making sure that every team in our company is at that kind of level.
There's a couple of quite groundbreaking ideas in there, I think. The employees deciding who to keep is very interesting to me.
Yeah.
I mean, how far does that go? Is it to the point of if there's an issue with somebody, who decides what to do about it?
Well, so they all meet together, and usually it's sort of a consensus decision. There's usually no one that's like, oh, this guy annoyed me, so I want to like shut him down, right? Because the people are good. If it wasn't for that, it'd be harder. So usually it's a discussion of, okay, here's what I saw. These are the things that I thought were good. These are the things that are a little bit concerning. What did you see? Next person down the line, dude, I saw those same concerning points. The next person, yeah, I kind of saw something similar. Well, maybe this isn't a good fit. Or maybe here's the concerning points. Actually, no, I saw these other 3 things that really made me feel like those weren't issues. Oh, okay, this might work, right? So that's the kind of discussion that goes on within those teams.
And I mean, 2 weeks feels like a relatively short period of time to get to know someone as a coworker.
That's true, but do you know what's even shorter? Is an hour-long interview, which is frankly what most people do.
You're not wrong.
Like,
you're not
terrible.
Wrong. Yes, no, you're not wrong on that at all. It's kind of around this issue I've quite often had in the past in workplaces that I've been employed by, where you're right that managers kind of dig in on the better the devil you know sort of mentality.
Yes.
And I've seen it a few times in my career as well, where you get to the point where there's someone who is quite clearly, they're either obviously blatantly underperforming and don't care, or they're actively toxic to the rest of the team for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Sometimes those two things are coming together, and then the manager just refuses to do anything about it. So no, can't, too much disruption, don't want the confrontation. It's better this person that we know how to get the best out of them, even if it's a lot of work. The next one, who knows what they might be like. And ultimately it destroys teams by keeping that person in place.
Absolutely. That is the seed to mediocrity, because what happens is your best people get fed up and your best people leave. And so you have this reversion to the mean or the average kind of like normal worker. And you get a team of maybe good B players with maybe some C players, but you're not going to change the world. Only way to get world-changing teams is if the manager is bold enough to take action to let the B players go. This
is it. Yeah. And there's loads of cliches. My 2 favorite are the chain's only as strong as the weakest link.
Yeah.
And then the other one is about if you're running a team race, it's only as fast as the slowest runner. Yeah, they're very simplistic, but it's what we're talking about, isn't it?
It's true. It's true.
Yeah. And
it's easy to understand. It's really hard to implement. And I've had many sleepless nights over these very issues.
Yeah. And so the approach you take to hiring, do you find that, I mean, it obviously works or you wouldn't keep doing it. Do you find you have a lot fewer incidences where you've got that potentially toxic person in the future, or is it too early to say?
Oh no, we've been doing this for years. It radically transformed things. We ended up, once I started understanding this principle, we ended up going through our whole staff. We laid most people off. Think about that. Most people were let go because I had been using this like, let's get somebody in the door approach, and it just destroyed things. Once we changed it, we revamped our system, the culture just radically transformed, because the culture is really, it's about what you're doing as a leader, but the biggest impact you can have is the people you choose to have in that team. And it radically improved. We ended up starting winning awards for being a top workplace. And it transformed everything. Now, that doesn't mean that we still don't have hiring mistakes. We do. Regularly, which is why we have the systems in place to move those people out and out of the company as needed. I think the more interesting challenge is, how do you create a really strong culture while you have this keeper test mentality, right? Because anyone could get let go if they're not performing at a really high level. And that's a really tricky thing to balance. I think one of the things that we have maybe not done super well at times is we'll actually go through waves where I'm like, all right, guys, let's all just spend the next month, think thoughtfully about the keeper test, because I'm seeing too many teams that are struggling here. And then suddenly what that does is everyone's a little scared for their job, right? And morale goes down a little bit for that. So we've been playing like, how do we do that better? But what we find time and time again is you do have a little bit of morale drop, but it gets so much better after the fact. And frankly, the best people actually so appreciate that you're doing it, because again, this coworker that was bothering them or was a frustration in their team is no longer here. And all they're working with is amazing people. They're challenging them to be better. They actually feel better in the long term.
It can kind of create that feeling that the manager, the leader is there for the team, not for whichever individual it is at the time, which I think is very important. And so I think I know the answer to this already, but where do you sit on the fence between, is it better to hire fast and then fire fast if it's the wrong person, or take a long time in your hiring process to maximize your chance of getting the right person in the first place?
Yeah, hire slow and fire fast is how I would look at it. And frankly, I think a lot of great leaders, that's how they look at it as well. The problem is, yes, as a manager, you feel the tension of, I need to fill this role. If I just get someone in here, my life is going to get easier. Maybe I'm working longer hours, or maybe I'm not getting stuff done. And so there's this stress to like compromise on that hiring. And you're like, oh, this person is probably good, but I'm not quite sure, but it's better than no one. And so you bring them on the team. Problem is, 9 times out of 10, unless you're 100% sure to begin with, 9 times out of 10, they end up not working out that well. So now you've got the next 6 months, year of performance improvement plans and trying to help them grow. Like maybe it's going to work out, not wanting to disrupt the team, having your coworkers be frustrated with the situation that you're in. And it's just terrible. You end up firing them in the end. It's way better. Give it a couple of more months in the front end to find the right person, not to have all that pain down the long term. And plus, again, once you start to see what amazing teams really look like, it becomes intoxicating because you don't want to settle for anything less. So if you've not seen that, really hold your bar high until you have seen what that looks like.
That's more or less what I thought you were going to say. Yeah. So something else I wanted to ask you about, and it's very much in this same topic we're discussing. You see quite a few headlines about things like unlimited paid time off. Another one I've seen is, I can't remember his name now, but there was the CEO in the States who was quite famous for basically putting his entire staff on the same salary. Those kind of measures, have you any experience in either of those or anything similar? And do you think they are the right answer to help build that better culture, the employee happiness, the higher productivity, or are they just a gimmick?
Pay and benefits should never be the reason why an employee leaves your company. Because again, if you're getting the top people, they're more than offsetting that cost, even if it's the top pay and benefits you're offering. And so we actually looked at the world's best companies and said, what benefits are they offering? Not even in our field, not in construction, not in a real estate, the world's best companies like Google, Netflix, and Amazon, and so on. And we literally took all of their benefits that we could There was maybe one or two like childcare. We can't have children on construction sites, but virtually everything that they offer, we offer to our staff. And that includes unlimited paid time off. I don't know of any other construction company that does that, or frankly, any company with hourly low-level employees that offers unlimited paid time off for vacation. And we did it. We put it in place. Now there's a lot of like ups and downs and headaches with it, lots of little nuances you have to figure out. But I really like that because it provides a fantastic benefit to people. And frankly, if you have the right team, they don't abuse it, right? So it's a win-win where they're not abusing it and they feel supported by the company. They feel trusted by the company for providing it. Now, the second point you brought up, let me make sure I heard you right, which sounds crazy to me. Did you say there's a company that gives everyone the same salary?
Yeah, it was a few years ago now. But
okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. That one I think is a little crazy. My philosophy is pay people differently, intentionally, right? Because every person has a different skill set, capacity, and ability. If you have someone on your team that is worth $1 million a year, because that's what they could get at other companies because they're providing way more value to you than that as a company. But now you're only paying them $100,000 a year because you're going to make the same for everyone else. That $1 million person is going to leave, right? What good is that for you as a company? And let's look at the flip side. Let's say you have someone that is really solid. He's really, really good at his position, but his skill set, the value he's providing the company, what he can make elsewhere in the market is $50,000 for that role and what he's capable of doing. If you give him $100,000, that's great. He's going to be really happy. He's going to stay forever, but you may not be able to function profitably as a business because now your labor costs are double, right? So it just gets everything out of whack. I think it's really important to pay people top of market, but don't pay people an amount that they're not actually worth.
Yeah, it's a fun. I feel like that one is possibly a gimmick, or at the very least, it very specifically only worked for that particular company or that particular industry. I think it was a software one, but anyway.
I mean, it could work if they're all very, very similar jobs, I suppose.
Yeah.
But if you get a different job and someone's legitimately worth a ton more, they're never going to come work for you, and then you won't get the best people that you need.
Yeah, I think I probably agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
Very curious about how well the unlimited time off has worked as well, because again, I go back and forth on that, and you read some of the articles about it from people who've worked in those companies. And one of the major criticisms I've seen is that unlimited effectively means none, because there's the peer pressure aspect and nobody wants to be seen to be the one taking all the time off.
Yeah. We really haven't had so much of that issue. We do monitor it, like how much people are actually taking off to make sure it's a healthy balance. But people are taking off, fair amounts of time on average. Things are working along that regard. I think the nuances we run into, the kinds of problems we face is like we just went through the holiday season here. We also allow the teams to set their own hours, which seems a little weird. But if you don't have a job that doesn't require certain hours, like who cares what your hours are? Like just get the work done. Even construction people. Now the challenge with construction people, if they're working on a team, their team has to work the same hours, but that team gets to select it if it can be independent of the rest of the company. So we have certain teams that work 4 days a week, 10 hours a day. We have certain teams that work 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. We have teams that work 9 hours a day and then half day on Fridays. It's a lot of variety. The teams that work 10 hours a day, 4 days a week, one of the questions that just came up recently is, okay, Monday was a holiday. Monday was Christmas Day. Do we get 8 hours worth of pay or 10 hours worth of pay? Right? It was a bit challenging, right? There's those nuances. And so the decision we made there is, well, company-wide, everyone gets 8 hours of pay because it's a day off. You as a team have chosen to work 10-hour days. You can still work 32 hours for a week. Maybe you're going to put 11-hour days in for 2 of them and 10 hours a day for the third, and you can still get the 40 hours to pay. But we didn't think it was right just because you chose to work 10 hours a day that you should also get 2 hours more of vacation time than everyone else. So it's that sort of thing that there's lots of nuances and questions that come up that are a little bit more challenging. But that's the only headache. Beyond that, I think teams like it. It's great support, and I don't know. It's unique. It makes us different.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for offering that flexibility. I can see how that's more difficult in the construction industry. So you probably have times when you're not allowed to work as well, and I guess heavy machinery brings its own problems too. Certainly in this country, there's rules about how long your shift can be and stuff like that if you're operating that kind of equipment. But then I guess if you look at the software industry, that's almost the standard now. It's the expectation. Like somebody won't work for you if you don't offer things like this. So give it 10 years, maybe it'll be the same in construction.
Maybe.
So I think a lot of what we've been talking about already have given us quite a nice insight into your leadership approach and the lessons that you've learned from your career already. One question I'd really like to know the answer to: what has been your own best experience of being led?
That's a great question. We didn't get into my history at all, but this was originally a family business. And so I grew up with it, right? I lived in this business. I swept floors, pulled nails out of boards, all the basic stuff as a kid. My parents, we didn't have much. So I was often forced to be on the construction sites growing up because they couldn't afford childcare, right? Even as a baby, there's a picture of me in a crib with a piece of plywood over the top of it as my dad was working on a site. Right? It's that kind of, I don't know if it's entirely legal, but I'm okay with it. My parents actually lost everything growing up, and my dad was actually kidnapped in Peru at one point. We eventually gained it all back. I went off to school and wanted nothing with the family business, but eventually realized that deep down, I wanted to make some kind of meaningful, positive impact in the world. So I joined. Because of that, I haven't had a lot of managers, right? Because I was with my dad, basically. And then even after that, within just a couple of years, my dad unexpectedly passed away and I ended up taking over the company at a fairly young age. But I think one of the things, so I have worked with a variety of other companies. I could give you some examples of bad managers. But one of the better ones was probably my dad in this regard, in that he gave me the space to fail. Right? There were times that I would do things and work on things, and he knew it was probably the wrong answer, but he let me learn those lessons. It wasn't like major stuff. I wasn't going to crash the business, but he gave me some runway to experiment, to try new things, to feel my way out, and to learn the lessons that come only from experimentation and learning and skinning your knees. So that's one thing I really liked about him and giving me some of that free reign. Also, he was a leader that led by example and servant leadership, in that if something was tough, if something was hard, he would be the first one on the front line helping out, solving the problems, fixing things, working beside you, making things happen. And I remember one particularly tough night. I was working on some plans for some new buildings in the unit layouts. I just could not figure it out. And I had this big deadline the next day. And it was maybe 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And he knew that I was struggling. And he came along beside me, and we worked probably till like 2 a.m. together. That was the last thing he wanted to do. He loved to sleep, but he was out there beside him, working with me to solve those issues.
Really, always nice hearing stories like that, I have to say. And it's so lovely having that family connection as well in what you do and the business too. But it did make me chuckle as well when you said about I could give you loads of examples of bad managers. I hear that pretty much everyone I've ever talked to be honest. Not just on the podcast. Everyone says that. So that's why we're here, really, with the podcast, to be honest. Yeah, but I think, it's always a mark of great leadership, in my opinion, is two of those key things that you said. One is giving people the freedom to fail. So avoiding that temptation to step in and do it for them, because then nobody ever learns anything, do they? You've got to have a little bit of risk there in order to learn the lesson, haven't you? And it's the same with teachers, isn't it? Like the best teachers are the ones who let you make the mistake to learn from.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then the servant leadership side of it as well. And it is a fine line to walk between those two things. It does take practice. It does take skill. Knowing when is the right moment to roll your sleeves up and help versus let people learn it as they go.
It's so interesting because it's incredibly nuanced.
Mm.
I mean, even things like team meetings and one-on-ones and the connection and communication you have with your staff, people want the information that they need at the right time and nothing more. And it's that, like, as a manager, you think, okay, I'll just do team meetings. I'm going to share everything, like go crazy deep, go talk a long time. And then people are giving you feedback. Meetings are too long. They're not productive. There's nothing useful coming out of them. You're like, okay, all right, fine. I'll just wipe all the team meetings. We'll meet once a month for a half an hour. We'll be fine. And then get feedback of, I don't have the right information. We're not coordinating properly. It's like, yeah, the right answer is way more nuanced than just having a meeting or not having a meeting. It's getting the right information, the right person, the right time. Same with servant leadership. It's knowing that, okay, this person's struggling in a way that they would appreciate me walking beside them and helping them solve the problem. But there's this person that's struggling in a way that they just want space to figure it out. And like understanding the nuance between those two and when to step in and when to not, that's the whole game. And it's super hard to do well.
Absolutely. I think it comes down to the individuals, doesn't it? And knowing your people.
Yes.
Because again, there's a third type of person. There's loads of types of person, but there might be a third person in your scenario who actually enjoys the problem. Like that's where their job satisfaction comes from, is really struggling with something, but figuring it out in the end. And so if you take that away from them, you've lost them probably. So yeah, I agree.
What's really interesting is recently as a leader, I've been working to get more feedback from all of our teams. I sat down with a few people and one person looked at me and said, Mike, one of the things I love most about you is you're fast to act, you move, you execute quickly, we get stuff done, and we're like taking hill after hill after hill. So, okay, great. The next meeting, the next person I talked to said, Mike, the thing I hate most about you is that you're fast to act, you're quick to move, you make decisions too quickly, you take hill after hill after hill. It's like, what do I do with that, right? And the interesting insight is you have to kind of alter your leadership style based upon the person you're working with, right? So the person that likes that fast action, quick communication, like I should continue doing that with them. The person that wants more stability, I've got to build that around them. I've got to, all right, here's the stuff you're doing for the week. Here's the deadline. I'm giving you plenty of time to work on it. I won't bug you during the week. Come back with the answers. I just have to change my style to match what their need is.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it in a nutshell. What advice would you offer to a first-time leader, maybe a new manager who is perhaps struggling with their new role?
There's a few skill sets I recommend to focus on mastering first. There's no silver bullet in management, but there's sort of best practices. I would say the first one, the most important one, is simply one-on-ones. Spend half an hour once a week or maybe once every other week, just sitting down with each employee and asking them, how's it going? And just be quiet, right? Ask questions to understand. Don't be thinking about just telling them a bunch of stuff. Really get into their mind of where things are at. I often, when I hear managers say, I'm struggling with all these problems, all these things are hitting me, no one's happy, that sort of thing, I go back to, are you doing your one-on-ones? And oftentimes they're very correlated between, that just not doing your one-on-ones. Because you might think, I can skip it this week, it's no problem. And the reality is it's no problem for any 1 week. But things start to compound, people start to build up frustrations, and eventually those will all explode and land all over your lap. And you want to work on them in advance, and you need that regular feedback and insight from where your staff is at. So that's one. Another important principle to start learning early on is feedback. And you want to make feedback as fluid and regular as water. And oftentimes, if you haven't been giving a lot of feedback, employees see feedback as a big negative thing. You're sitting me down in the office and it's going to be all this horrible stuff. No, that's not how it should be. You should be getting like 5 to 10 pieces of feedback every single day. And one little trick to do this is put a few coins in your pocket. In your left pocket, put maybe 5 coins, or actually make it simple. Just start off with one coin in your left pocket. And every day come into work and give one piece of feedback to one person and move that coin from the left pocket to the right pocket. Just get good at doing that once a day. And when you give feedback, be thoughtful about, focus on something that's very tangible, very like, bad attitude is not something to give feedback on. But hey, when you frowned and you looked at me and said, that made me feel like you had a bad attitude, but you're tying what they specifically talked about or what they specifically did, the behavior you want changed, to then how you feel about that behavior. And then you just wrap it up with, hey, what can you do to change it? Or way to go, keep it up if it's positive. And last little piece, ask them if they're willing to receive feedback. And the reason that is feedback is all about supporting and helping them. And unless you ask if they want to receive it, what are you doing? You're not supporting them. Maybe you're trying to get something off of your chest, and that's not good feedback. It should never be coming from a place of I'm frustrated. It should be coming from a place of I want to help. So those are two really tangible points. From more of a leadership perspective, this is probably something many of your listeners have heard many times over, so I'll go quickly, is something, understand your purpose, your mission, your values. Purpose is why you exist. Mission is what you are doing. Values are who you are. Make sure they are super simple. Ours are like a mission and purpose are just like 5 words. Like, we build and manage awesome apartments. That's what we do. And why do we do it? We want to create a better way for people to live. That's it. That's it. Super simple. And the other thing with values, I think a lot of leaders get this wrong. They think that values need to look and feel a certain way, right? This is flowery, like we're all about teamwork, or we're all about, what's good for everyone. No, values should be the thing that distinguish you from other companies. And what's most important is not that they sound good. What's most important is that they're true to who you are as a leader, right? Your employees can sniff out hypocrisy like no one's business. And unless your values are perfectly aligned with who you are, they're going to sniff it out as apocryphal. But the power in values and really spelling them out is then you can attract people to your company that match and fit who you are. See, if you are all about, maybe you're all about really comfortable work-life balance. Nobody's going to work more than 40 hours a week, and that's who you are. Make that as part of your values. That's going to help distinguish you, and that maybe sounds flowery, but then you're going to live by that, and you're going to find people that fit well into that. But maybe you're different. Maybe you're all about making a ton of money, and you want to get $1 million in everyone's bank account. Maybe that's not as flowery. That's who you are. Be okay with that, and be like, dude, you're going to work 80, 90 hours a week here. It's going to be horrible. You're not going to have much of a family life, but you're going to make a freaking ton load of money, right? And now you might be attracting really young kids out of college that want that kind of environment. What's the worst thing for your business is if you give the flowery 40-hour-a-week value, but you're a workaholic culture, you're going to bring people in, burn them out, and send them out of your organization. Values are about distinguishing the kind of people you want in your organization, the company, kind of people that don't fit in there. I could go on forever, but that's a few useful tips.
Extremely useful tips. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the whole hypocrisy thing, I totally agree. It's one of those things that I don't know if it's like the social mediaization of life and the workplace, or whether it is more of a cynical thing to try and attract the better workforce or something. I don't know, but there's so many companies out there, so many leaders out there who say what they think people want to hear when it comes to values rather than what is necessarily true. Sometimes it's both, but quite often they get themselves in trouble because it's not both. And you're right. They get caught.
Honestly, there's a segment of the population that wants something different than the sort of social media average. Mm-hmm. And so if you're the kind of company that is all about making money, like, be honest about that, and you're going to attract the kind of people that will help make that a reality for you, even though it's not sort of kosher in the social media world.
Yeah. And I mean, the other advantage of it in terms of being honest and being true to the company as it exists, as well as how it wants to be, is this a lot less work to realize those values then, isn't it? You don't have to remember to live by them if they're already true.
Yes. Yes. You'll live by them very naturally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Leadership Heroes.
Last question I have for you. So this one is called Leadership Heroes. It's my favorite question. As in the question is, if you had to pick one person, and they could be anyone you like, alive, dead, past, present, real, fictitious even, who in your opinion would perfectly embody leadership, who would that person be and why?
Boy, perfectly embody leadership. I don't know if that physically exists, but I would, my personal favorite, the one that really changed my world is Reed Hastings, the founder, the developer of Netflix. And he changed my thinking on hiring the best people, about creating the right culture, paying the top of market, making sure you're doing everything to support your team. And in supporting your team, that's going to change your business. I didn't understand those principles before I started to learn that from him. Now, he was never a mentor of mine. That'd be really cool. But just learning from him from afar through books and podcasts and things of that nature, he's changed my world completely.
Oh, excellent. I've not had him before. That is a good pick. And I particularly like the fact that it's actually had a real impact on the way that you conduct your own company as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that one. I think we're pretty much out of time. The only thing really left for me to say is, first of all, thank you for your time today. It's been great talking with you. And second of all, if any of the listeners would like to learn more about you, about the company and what you guys are up to, is there a website or similar that you'd like to point them towards?
Yeah, the best place to go is our website, and that's norhart.com. That's NORHART.com. And two really interesting things there. The first is our shows. We have a few different podcasts and other shows that we do. Probably my favorite is Zero to Unicorn. It's about the journey of small business to $1 billion scale. And one of my favorite guests was Michael Usland, who's the executive producer and the originator of Batman. And when he was young, he was able to cobble together a few investors to buy the movie rights to Batman. But it took him 10 years of people slamming doors in his face, telling him he was an idiot, telling him that nobody wanted to see a dark and serious Batman movie. But he believed in his dream, he believed in his mission, and after 10 years, he was able to make the Batman movies come to life on the big screen. And really, in many ways, he's the father of modern superhero movies. But the amazing thing is it took him 10 years. Not 1 week, not 1 month, not a year, 10. And so that's a great lesson, a great story to hear from. And another kind of interesting thing that we have going on is we now have an investment platform where people can actually invest in the projects that we have. We're currently offering 10% interest on people's money, and you can lock up your money between 6 months and 5 years and earn a great rate of return of just 10%. And so if you're interested in either of those, go check out our website, norhart.com.
Lovely. And I'll pop a link to that in the episode description as well so everyone can find it easily. Well, that's been great, Mike. Thank you so much for your time again. And have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Thanks again to Mike for his time today and for sharing all of his experiences with us. Some really cool ideas there and things that any progressive, modern, forward-looking company should be thinking about, maybe even experimenting with. And great to see it in an industry like construction as well, fully behind the mission there and everything that Mike and Norhart are trying to achieve. Listener, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found it useful. Thank you for listening. Thanks for making it this far. If you would like to learn more about Mike or Norhart, check the episode description for the links we just talked about. And if you are considering joining the Integrity Leaders community that I spoke about at the beginning of the episode, again, that link is in the episode description. Come and join us. There's absolutely no obligation, no pressure, no cost. Just come and see what you think. If it's not for you, that's totally fine. But if you are feeling that loneliness, if you are feeling isolated as a leader and you're not getting much in the way of support or training from your employer, then that community is there for you to use. It's built for people just like you. So I hope to see you there soon. And as always, if you have any questions about that, anything we've talked about on the podcast, or you just want to have a chat about leadership, feel free to reach out. Again, my details are in the episode description, and I'd love to hear from you. I hope you'll join us again next week when we'll be joined by another great guest. I'll be talking to Libby Vincent, who works with women in the corporate world to help them better navigate the current corporate landscape. So we'll be talking all about leadership in that context, why the majority of leadership advice actually fails to resonate with women in that environment, and what we can do about it as leaders and managers to help improve that situation. So it's going to be an interesting conversation. As I say, I hope you'll join us. Thank you again for being with us today and for listening. I'll be back next week. And in the meantime, as always, remember, be a leader, not a boss.